Emma wiped the counter for the third time that evening, though it was already spotless. The restaurant was elegant, filled with soft music and the quiet chatter of well-dressed customers. She moved quickly between tables, refilling glasses, taking orders, and forcing a polite smile despite her exhaustion. She had been working here for almost 2 years. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid the bills. Every day was the same: long hours on her feet, demanding customers, and little appreciation. But Emma never complained. She needed this job. She had grown used to being ignored. Customers barely looked at her, treating her like part of the furniture. Some were kind, offering small smiles or a simple thank you. Others acted as if she didn't exist. Her co-workers liked her though. They often joked that Emma had the patience of a saint. No matter how rude a customer was, she never lost her temper. She believed in treating people with respect, even when they didn't deserve it. Tonight, the restaurant was busier than usual. A large group had just arrived, filling the room with laughter and expensive perfume. Emma adjusted her apron and took a deep breath. It was going to be a long night. She walked toward a new table near the window, where a man had just sat down. His suit looked expensive. His watch even more so. He didn't glance at the menu, just tapped his fingers impatiently on the table. Emma put on her best professional smile and approached him. "Good evening, sir. Welcome. Can I get you something to drink?" The man finally looked up, his eyes filled with boredom. And then, without hesitation, he insulted her. Emma barely had time to process the man's expression before he spoke. "You took long enough," he said, his voice dripping with impatience. "I don't have all night." She kept her polite smile, though her stomach tightened. "I'm sorry for the wait, sir. Would you like to start with a drink?" The man sighed loudly, as if her question was unbearable. "Sparkling water. The most expensive one you have. And make sure it's cold. I don't drink anything below my standards." Emma nodded and turned to leave. But the man wasn't done. "Actually," he added, looking her up and down, "I hope you can handle a proper order. You don't look like someone who's used to fine dining." Emma felt her cheeks heat up, but she stayed calm. She had dealt with people like this before. Some customers thought money made them better than everyone else. She refused to let their words get to her. She simply said, "I'll be right back with your water," and walked away. Her coworker Jake passed by and gave her a sympathetic glance. "That guy's got an attitude," he muttered under his breath. Emma sighed. "It's fine. I've had worse." She grabbed the most expensive bottle of sparkling water and returned to the man's table. He didn't acknowledge her as she poured it into his glass. Instead, he picked up his phone and started scrolling. "Do you know who I am?" he asked suddenly, without looking up. Emma hesitated. "I don't think so, sir." He smirked. "Of course you don't. People like you never do. I make more money in a day than you make in a year." Emma's grip tightened on the bottle, but she forced herself to stay composed. "That's nice, sir. Are you ready to order?" The man finally put his phone down and leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was some kind of amusement. "Yeah, sure. But don't mess it up. I don't have time for mistakes." Emma nodded and took his order, ignoring the cold arrogance in his voice. She had no idea that by the end of the night, everything she thought about this man would change. Emma moved quickly, placing the man's order with the kitchen. She had no interest in knowing who he was, or how much money he made. She just wanted to do her job and get through the night. But he wasn't going to make it easy for her. When she returned to his table with his appetizer, he barely looked at it before wrinkling his nose. "This isn't what I ordered." Emma checked the plate. "I believe this is exactly what you asked for, sir." He scoffed. "Are you arguing with me?" His voice was loud enough for nearby tables to hear. A few customers glanced over. Emma shook her head. "No, sir, if there's an issue, I can—" "The issue is that you don't listen." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "No wonder you're stuck in a job like this." A couple at the next table exchanged awkward looks. A waiter near the counter sighed and shook his head. Everyone could hear him, but no one said a word. Emma's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'm sorry, sir, I can have the kitchen remake it." He waved a hand. "Just bring the main course, and make sure you don't mess that up either." She nodded and walked away, feeling every pair of eyes on her. She had been insulted before, but something about this man was different. He enjoyed making her feel small. The kitchen staff noticed her tense expression when she handed in the new order. Jake, her coworker, whispered, "What did he do this time?" Emma sighed. "Just the usual." Jake shook his head. "People like him think money gives them the right to treat others like dirt." Emma didn't respond. She just grabbed the man's next dish and carried it carefully back to his table. The moment she placed it in front of him, he let out a dramatic sigh. "This steak is overcooked." Emma hesitated. "It's exactly as you ordered, sir." He gave her a mocking smile. "Are you a chef now, or just a waitress who thinks she's smarter than she is?" A few people gasped softly. Someone near the bar muttered, "That's too much." Emma felt a lump in her throat, but she refused to give him the reaction he wanted. "Would you like me to replace it?" The man smirked. "Forget it. I wouldn't trust you with another order." Emma turned away, holding back the sting of embarrassment. But she wasn't the only one watching this unfold. In the corner of the restaurant, an older man had been quietly observing everything. And soon, things were about to change. Emma tried to shake off the humiliation as she moved to another table. The restaurant had grown quieter, but she could still feel the weight of curious stares. People had seen everything, but no one stepped in. That was how it always was. Customers like him could say whatever they wanted, and she had to take it with a smile. As she cleared plates from another table, she noticed someone watching her. An older man sat alone near the back of the restaurant. He was well dressed but not flashy. His expression was calm, thoughtful. He wasn't looking at his food. He was looking at her. Emma hesitated, then walked over. "Is everything okay, sir?" The man smiled kindly. "Yes, I just wanted to say you handled that situation well." Emma blinked in surprise. She glanced at Mr. Carter, who was still scrolling through his phone, completely unbothered. "Oh, thank you," she said quietly. The man nodded. "That kind of patience isn't easy, especially with people like him." Emma smiled, but there was exhaustion behind it. "It's part of the job." He studied her for a moment, then asked, "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 2 years," she said. "It's not my dream job, but it pays the bills." He nodded again, as if filing that information away. "You work hard," he said. "I can see that." Emma wasn't sure why, but his words comforted her. Most customers barely noticed the servers. But this man had seen everything. Before she could say anything else, Mr. Carter's voice cut through the moment. "Waitress, are you working or making friends?" Emma clenched her jaw and turned back to him. "I'll be right there, sir." The older man sighed and shook his head. "People like him always think they're better than others," he murmured. Emma forced a small smile. "I'm used to it." The man looked at her carefully, as if thinking about something important. Then he said, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have to be." She didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But soon, she would. The next evening, Emma was wiping down tables when her manager approached her. His expression was unreadable. "Emma, can you come to my office for a moment?" Her heart skipped a beat. She had done nothing wrong, but being called into the office always made her nervous. She nodded and followed him through the busy restaurant, her mind racing. When she stepped inside, she froze. Sitting across from her manager was the older man from the night before. He was dressed in the same elegant but understated way, his expression calm as always. Emma hesitated. Hello, sir." The man smiled. "Please have a seat." She sat down slowly, glancing between him and her manager. Something about this felt serious. The man leaned forward, folding his hands. "I should introduce myself properly," he said. "My name is Richard Lawson. I own this restaurant chain." Emma's eyes widened. She had worked here for 2 years and never once met the owner. He wasn't just a customer, he was her boss's boss. "I was here last night," Mr. Lawson continued. "I saw how that man treated you. I wanted to see how you'd handle it." Emma swallowed. She wasn't sure what to say. "I've owned restaurants for a long time," he went on, "and I've met all kinds of people. Rude customers aren't new to me, but I pay attention to how my employees react. And you?" He smiled. "You have something rare. Patience, professionalism, and self-respect." Emma felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, confusion, and disbelief. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. Mr. Lawson nodded. "Now about that man, Mr. Carter." His face darkened slightly. "Do you know who he really is?" Emma hesitated. "He said he was rich, some kind of businessman." Mr. Lawson let out a small chuckle. "That's what he wants people to think, but the truth is he's a fraud." Emma's breath caught. "What?" He used to work for me, Mr. Lawson explained, years ago, but he was dishonest. Stole from the company, manipulated employees. I fired him. After that, he tried to start his own businesses, but they all failed. Emma sat in stunned silence. He puts on a show, acting important because he's desperate to seem successful, Mr. Lawson continued. But in reality, he's drowning in debt. Emma didn't know how to respond. The man who had humiliated her so publicly was a fraud himself, and yet, despite everything, she didn't feel anger. She just felt pity. Emma sat in silence, processing what she had just heard. Mr. Carter, the man who had belittled her, wasn't successful at all. He was pretending. She thought back to the way he had spoken to her, so arrogant, so sure of his own superiority. And yet, behind all of it, he was struggling. Mr. Lawson watched her reaction carefully. "I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something," he said. "People like him tear others down because they're afraid." He wanted to feel powerful, and the easiest way to do that was by making you feel small. Emma nodded slowly. It made sense, but it didn't make his words hurt any less. Mr. Lawson leaned back in his chair. "But let's stop talking about him," he said with a small smile. "I actually wanted to talk about you." Emma blinked. "Me?" He nodded. "Like I said, I've owned restaurants for years. I know how hard this job is. I've seen people crack under pressure. But you handled yourself with grace. That's not something you can teach." Emma wasn't sure where this was going, so she stayed quiet. "I think you deserve better than waiting tables for the rest of your life," he continued. "So I'd like to offer you a promotion." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "A promotion?" "Yes," he said. "I need a new assistant manager. Someone who understands the work, treats people with respect, and stays calm under pressure. You're perfect for the role." Emma stared at him, barely able to believe what she was hearing. "But I don't have management experience," she said hesitantly. He waved a hand. "That doesn't matter. You have everything else, the things that actually make a great leader. I can teach you the rest." For the first time in a long time, Emma felt something unfamiliar, pride in herself. Someone had noticed her. Someone had seen her worth, not just as a waitress, but as a person. She took a deep breath. I'd love that," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Mr. Lawson smiled. "Good. Then it's settled." As Emma left the office, her mind was spinning. She had walked into work that day expecting another exhausting shift. Instead, she was walking out with a new future. Later that evening, as she helped close the restaurant, she saw Mr. Carter again. He was sitting alone at the bar, staring at his phone, looking frustrated. He had no idea that she now knew the truth about him. For a brief moment, Emma considered saying something, throwing his words back at him. But then she decided against it. She didn't need revenge. She had already won.